Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of BacklogBusters, where I continue the fight to defeat my gaming backlog while foolishly feeding, nourishing, and giving this monster more strength with each new pickup. I recently visited the unexpectedly snowy and frigid enough to require the purchase of warmer clothes while I was there, Boulder, Colorado, for a beautiful wedding. We spent a few extra nights in town visiting friends, which had the added benefit of providing me enough free time to type video games into Google Maps and visit Game Force Boulder. And I'm not sure if it's due to this being a college town or if there's a large retro scene in this area, but the store was extremely well stocked with games I've never found in any of my local stores. So I neglected both the size and weight limits of our luggage in favor of 12 pickups that are a mix of recommendations from you and things from my wish list. Starting with the furthest thing from video games, boring printed pages. I love old gaming magazines, strategy guides, hint books, they're all extremely nostalgic for me. Luckily, I still have multiple strategy guides from my childhood, which I used to pore over, reading descriptions of what the game played like, what the areas were like, and imagining what it would be like to play these games long before I actually had access to a console of my own or the games. So when confronted with the shelves of strategy guides in this store, I panicked and grabbed the first two I noticed, starting with StarFox Adventures, which I do own, but I've never played. I just remember this being heavily marketed in Nintendo Power magazines at the time, and I, having no strong attachment to the StarFox series, so wanted to play this game that looked like a Zelda game, but finally included what the series has been missing this entire time: dinosaurs. But now, whenever I do get around to playing StarFox Adventures, I'll have these beautiful full-color maps to help me through a game that may not even need this additional help, unless there are a lot of hidden collectibles or something. But I just love flipping through these pages with so much custom art and extra little details, even if I might never actually need it in the game. The other strategy guide is for Metroid Prime Hunters, one of my first and most played DS games, alongside Super Mario 64 DS. But unlike Mario, I never could finish Prime Hunters, constantly getting lost, stuck, and generally being a horrible hunter, and letting my prey escape constantly. So I mainly played the multiplayer game with friends on the few occasions where the stars aligned and 4 DSs were in the same room. Then the other 99% of the time, I played with bots. This is the game that introduced me to first-person shooters on the DS, and my small, cramp-resistant hands loved this control scheme in a way that few other players seem to. So maybe with the help of this guide and its large printed-out 3D maps, I'll finally be able to clear this game off my backlog, after I get around to the first Metroid Prime game, of course. Now, let's move on to what you're really here for, video games. Starting with the oldest game first, Driver. You are the wheelman for the PS1, and it just feels so rare that these brittle PS1 jewel cases are even in halfway good shape, without at least a crack or two. But even if you find pristine plastic, most of the time this manual is missing, which wouldn't be that bad if they didn't also serve as the cover art for the game, so finding this in such good condition was unexpected. And it's the game I was most worried about during the travel back home. I did think this was a decently thick manual at 23 pages, but almost all of its heft is due to a registration card, and it adds in a tiny bit of backstory description before explaining what each mode and setting in the game means, so this is a 2 out of 5. Leave it in the case. But what's it play like? Well, it's nothing like the other Driver game I played. Instead, it played out like a recurring nightmare of mine, with a pop quiz, a timer, and zero knowledge of the subject matter. Because while I could fumble my way through the controls enough to do a 180 and speed, I've got no clue how to successfully pull off a 360, or what direction and around what I should be making a lap.
Maybe I'll give you a call when I need a ride to the grocery store.
So while Driver 3 had me shooting criminals within seconds, and San Francisco saw me warping between bodies within the first few minutes, in Driver 1, after several attempts, I'm still on my learner's permit, and unable to leave this parking garage at all. Is this a more sim-like driving game? Am I missing some simple button combinations? Not really sure here, but I'm open to suggestions from any driving instructors out there. Luckily, Rockstar is here to add some arcade to my racer with the first Midnight Club game that's complete in box and features a full-color manual that tricks you into thinking it's monochrome. And then all of a sudden, bam, the PlayStation logo is colored. It's also filled with useful information like an explanation that hookmen are people who like to drive illegally, not whatever else you were thinking. You'll also get portraits and descriptions of the characters, and this manual even peers through time to confirm that a sequel will be coming soon. This is a solid 4 out of 5, a novella worth reading. Gameplay-wise, I knew nothing about this series going in, other than it had Rockstar's name on it, and while I expected an open world of some sort, I didn't realize this released a year before GTA 3, and lets you drive around and challenge other hookmen you find out in the world. You can also pull out your dumb phone and call your racing buddies to trigger missions long before GTA 4 implemented anything like this. It runs well, plays well, if a little touchy, and kind of blows me away that this game beat Need for Speed to market on the PS2 by a year and was released 4 years before Need for Speed would even attempt an open world racing game. Yet, I've never heard anyone talk about Midnight Club. Is this a hidden gem? Did anyone play this? Should I play more? Which brings me to the next game, Midnight Club 2 for the Xbox. I generally try and grab Xbox copies of games, as most of the time the consoles seem to get ports a little later, but with either better performance or extra features. And I say this mostly because of Hot Pursuit 2 doing the opposite in almost every way. This game is also complete in box with a beefier, more colorful manual, where they aren't just cramming text and tiny screenshots together on a few sheets of printer paper. There's style to each page, each layout, even maps, and descriptions of the type of road you'll encounter. Even the notes page is a work of art. Though it doesn't leave room for those notes of yours, but like true art, this is uncompromising, a shining 5 out of 5, not just a manual, an art book. And hey, once you put the disc in and pick up the controller, this plays even better than the first, making small tweaks to already cool ideas from the first game, like checkpoints, which are glowing towers of light alongside glowing arrows, so you can actually keep your eyes on the road, not the minimap. This game also adds what I feel is a brilliant rear view mirror that doesn't distract me with a full view of the cars and world behind me, but just their headlights that grow as they get closer, giving me all the info I need on opponent positions, but without overwhelming me. This game is a blast to play so far, but most of all, I think Rockstar was really onto something great here, and I'm sad this interface didn't make its way into GTA or other open world racers. And surprise, here's Midnight Club 3, which sadly has no manual. And based on what the series has printed so far, this might be the first time I go to eBay just to order a manual, just so I can find out how this compares. But being able to pick up almost the whole series in one trip was just too convenient to pass up. You might notice the PGA sticker on the front of the box, and this was one of the interesting things about this store. They had games sitting in the display cases for you to look at, but would occasionally grab an empty case and a sheet of cover art, the game disc, and throw them all together. A nice combo of the cleanest cases they had paired with the cleanest disc and cover art for a lot of the games I picked out. I really appreciated this approach, as I wish there was an option in my local stores, because sometimes I'll find a broken case with nice art and then a dirty case with a nice manual, and would love to mix and match like this. Starting up a new career and playing through a few races, I had one question in my head. Is this series secretly as good, if not better, than Need for Speed and Burnout? Because each game keeps making improvements on the last, with this one feeling faster, even having that bloom and late night haze of the underground games, continuing to refine the checkpoints, arrow, and rear view mirror for an awesome, immersive driving experience with detailed and dense areas featuring more shortcuts and ramps than the little I played of the first two. I'm very interested in playing more of this series now. But that's enough driving. Let's stretch our legs and our third eye in Psi-Ops, the Mindgate conspiracy, which was recommended by one of you, but I cannot seem to find the comment, so I apologize, I can't shout you out, but hey, I got the game. Sadly, with this being a game from 2004, it's starting to become uncommon to find any manuals in color. But this does feature 2 big pages of lore, descriptions and tips for all the guns and side powers, and even 5 whole pages of characters' descriptions, like how every non-supervillain you face are referred to as meat puppets and are mind-controlled against their will to try and defeat you at any cost. Somehow managing to make me feel bad about every single minion I smash into a wall moves this up to a 4 out of 5, a novella worth reading. Once I got my hands on the controller though, I was surprised at how well what seems like a tech demo of Havoc physics runs on the original Xbox. This is good because it's the main draw here, running around, shooting, slamming, and slinging boxes, enemies, and explosive barrels, or anything not tied down. I also didn't expect to see stealth show up and demonstrate this game's quieter side, as you remote view areas to learn enemy patterns and sneak past them. This does make me excited to see what other psychic powers appear and where exactly the story of over-the-top physics-powered villains ends up going. In the last Pickups video, I tried the confusingly controlled bad cop simulator, True Crime Streets of LA, and now I'm back with its sequel, True Crime New York City, which has a paltry 15 pages of text without an image in sight in here, all of which is redundant as the lengthy tutorial more than covers everything in here. The few bonus pages are advertisements for shoes, music, and a flip phone. But don't worry, you've got an entire page for all the notes you'll definitely be taking. Did anyone ever write in these pages? This one is a 2 out of 5. Leave it in the case. The first game's opening did not impress me, but I had renewed interest in the series after Rodrigo Cabral left a comment calling out that a third game, True Crime Hong Kong, was announced, delayed, and then canceled before release. After which it was somehow revived as Square Enix bought the canceled game, but without the True Crime IP, whatever that is. So instead, they released it as Sleeping Dogs. In addition to that interesting history, this second game immediately felt better to play, with most of the confusing controls seemingly smoothed out and normalized. The odd lock-on shooting from the first game does return, though it feels much better, and allows for some quick-fire situations that include some slow motion, which is always appreciated. The open world seemed decent, and you'll be unlocking cars and clothes from the police department for undercover work, I assume, as well as dealing with the morality system where you can choose whether to turn in contraband or sell it on the black market and do other bad cop stuff. I'm now realizing this is a very racing-focused Pickups video as we continue our four-wheeled adventures with Crash Nitro Kart, which was one of the smallest manuals we've seen yet, with a wispy 8 pages of actual information. If you're skipping past the table of contents and how to turn on your PS2, luckily, the 8 remaining pages are full of useful info like the different boost types, which aren't really explained in the game. All the weapons and characters are also here. Sure, it's all in black and white, but there are shockingly images and some design elements that don't make this the most bland thing ever, earning it a 3 out of 5. Worth a read. The Crash Team Racing series came up because several of you pointed out the similarities to Diddy Kong Racing, so I picked up a PS1 copy earlier this year and have been on the hunt for the rest of the series. And I was overjoyed to find that this second game also has a Diddy Kong Racing style adventure mode, so I was all in with this immediately. It keeps the interesting timing-based power slide boost and jumping boost of the first game, and while nothing stood out as new or different mechanics-wise, surely another kart racing adventure game with new tracks can't be a bad thing, right? Now, let's move on to the future of games. Motion controls, with Tenchu Shadow Assassins on the Wii. And it certainly does feel like the future because this manual is thin, only giving a brief story and a control briefing, with 2 whole pages served for lengthy descriptions of the various actions you'll encounter through the tutorial, and all literally show an image of what they do, which you think would prevent the need for more explanation out of the game, but no. 1 out of 5. Barely worth printing. And I'd also describe this game as a thin excuse for motion controls, because no action I saw in this game made good use of the Wiimote at all, instead using various Wiimote motions to complicate what really should have been a button press. Also, why on earth would they make me control aiming with the control stick on the nunchuck and not by just pointing at the screen? Well, of course, the feeling of flicking the Wiimote like a shuriken is more important than aiming easily. You'll even shake the Wiimote to roll, and it makes this feel like a great example of people's complaints over waggle games, which just made you wave the Wiimote around for no reason and didn't actually design their games around what works well with this controller. I couldn't even finish the tutorial, as once I went indoors, controlling the camera became a whole nother issue, on top of trying to understand how the limited things I had been taught so far could get me past the guards in 2 different hallways who never move, don't investigate thrown shurikens landing near them, and can see me even in the dark. I'm starting to see why I didn't hear anyone talk about the Wii Tenchu game. Recently, I've been on the lookout for physical versions of the Skate games, because while I loved the Tony Hawk Pro Skater series, I never fully got into Skate, and I'd like to change that. But I wasn't aware there was a spin-off entry for the DS and Wii called Skate It. And we're not off to a great start here with a manual so thin and flimsy a newspaper might have more rigidity than this. And it's just got horrible control diagrams of you tilting what appears to be a front-facing view of a Wiimote and a Wii balance board turned pie chart that's not at all hard to understand. And of course, the required tutorial covers all of this when you start the campaign, so this is a 1 out of 5. Barely worth printing. The pitch of a simpler, possibly more accessible version of Skate sounds like a decent idea in my head. Even approximating the feeling of skating with motion controls, I could imagine being neat, but I'm not sure this is the game to deliver on either of those things. You basically pretend your Wiimote is a tech deck, and you tilt it around in odd ways, which made me continuously question what the best grip position was. On the flatland tricks and grinds, I did start to get the hang of it, and have a pretty good time. But then they asked for more complex tricks and asked me to enter the half pipe for some spins and grabs. And this is where this all just fell apart for me. It was hard to get enough speed or jump high enough to achieve any height to pull off a trick. And the longer I played, the more I felt like the tricks in-game happened to fold second or two after any motion with the Wiimote. It's an interesting oddity nonetheless, and maybe I should try the balance board to see if it changes things, but so far this felt more difficult to play than any of the plain skate games. Now, for the most disgusting Wii game I've ever played. MadWorld. I was always intrigued by this game, the black and white visuals, the graphic novel style, and mostly how a game this M-rated ended up on the Wii at all. This is one manual that I'll give a pass for being in black and white, because they're just being faithful to the black and white visuals, right? It does let you in on some story and character details, but the rest of the manual is just more descriptive versions of what's covered in the, say it with me, required tutorial section. And with each passing bare bones manual that's just relisting inputs and menu options, I now see why manuals started to die out, because unless they are treated as an art or lore booklet, they don't really serve a point. So much of this is in the game already. So this is a 2 out of 5, leave it in the case, if only because it's making me realize how disappointing most manuals are. Obviously, the style of this game is what most stands out, almost as much as the bright red blood splattered everywhere, because this game is all about combining more and more gruesome takedowns together to raise your score in a last man standing blood sport. But while the visuals exude this dramatic, action-packed graphic novel style, the controls feel lacking as I slowly stomp around, clumsily reorienting myself and the camera to attempt to pick up a weapon or an enemy to complete a combo. So I can't say that I'm loving any part of this more than the visuals on this one so far. And it feels a little odd, as I've come to expect a certain feel from Platinum's games like Bayonetta, Vanquish, Nier, and this feels much more clunky and slow paced than I was expecting. But that could also be my loose grip on the controls at this early point. But as if this order was predestined, the MadWorld manual includes a pamphlet for the Conduit, our next Wii game, whose manual gains some points for being decently large, loses points as this game is in color, but the ink wasn't. Though it does feature more than the bare minimum with items, weapons, story, and environmental descriptions, which is nice to see, landing this travel guide to alien weaponry a solid 3 out of 5. Worth a read. This is one of the few first-person shooters on the Wii without Metroid in the title. And ever since playing the Wii remake of GoldenEye, I'm always on the lookout for more interesting games with movement on the nunchuck and aiming using the Wiimote, which I'm convinced is way more accurate than using a little control stick and much more mouse and keyboard-like. And wouldn't you know it, these controls feel great here, especially because the gameplay is solid. It features the most natural grenade throwing I've ever experienced, and the levels look decent. And there are also little flourishes like the fancy depth of field effects when reloading. Sure, you might confuse the second area for a generic Call of Duty level, but with this conspiracy theory-laden story, bug-like creatures, plus what seems like Metroid Prime scanning additions, and some sci-fi influences trickling in, this might make for an interesting story mode that props up one of my favorite control schemes. The last game I picked up is entirely due to a video from Good Vibes Gaming, who called out that the 2010 game Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands, which was released alongside the Prince of Persia movie, had an original Wii game, not a port or a downgrade, but one custom built for the hardware. And obviously, having never played through a single Prince of Persia game, I decided I have to pick up this version. Which I didn't realize till after checking out that this game is brand new and sealed, so this is the first unboxing experience on the channel. This is an extremely thin manual, so I don't have high hopes. It's in black and white, of course, and it does look to have a tiny bit of story description. Yep, a few custom enemies and icons and layouts that look a little different than normal, but it seems like it's a bunch of explanations of your powers, which I'm sure it will explain to me very, very early in the game. It does have some enemies, so that's a plus. That brings it up a little bit. And cursor states, that's interesting. I guess you'll be doing a bunch of pointing in here. But overall, that's a 2 out of 5. Leave it in the case. The one benefit is that this comes with a copy of the first Prince of Persia game, which I've never played, and from what I've seen, is kind of hard to come by unless you have an Apple II or want to emulate it. Through the magic of editing, I've returned with newfound princely knowledge to tell you that this game is pretty fun. It might be a little hard to believe that a Ubisoft game on the Wii didn't go wild with motion controls, but so far they did it. It feels like the small amount I played of the Sands of Time, with a focus on traditional parkour puzzle solving that these games were known for, but with you kissing genies this time and with a tasteful amount of motion control as your sword swing is controlled by the Wiimote, which shows an incredible amount of restraint from the House of the Raving Rabbits. It's got a style that fits the Wii visually and, most importantly, fits within the performance limitations of the console. And from the little I've played, that really makes me want to clear the Prince of Persia series off my backlog, especially since this game is part of the Sands of Time continuity, slotting in after the first game and before the Prince took a darker turn in The Warrior Within and The Two Thrones. Also, the inclusion of the original Prince of Persia is so nice to see, especially since this was one of the last re-releases of that game. This reminded me that I played a tiny bit of this on the NES, and just like all those years ago, I am terrible at this game. Seeing the words 60 minutes left appear at the bottom of the screen gave me the ridiculous thought that this might be a quick game to finish, but after dying over and over after mere seconds of progress, this will not be easy. The rotoscoped animation that Jordan Mechner made for this game, though, still looks incredible today, and I'll definitely be starting my search for the rest of the series if only to admire its history. But that's it for the games I picked up while visiting Game Force in Boulder, Colorado. Have you played any of these? Are they good games that I should move up to the top of my backlog and check out sooner rather than later? Let me know in the comments below. And don't worry, the next non-short video will be a review of a game I've never finished before, but have been getting an unprecedented number of requests to play. Until then, thank you all so much for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.